everybody. Welcome to the Disillusioned Podcast. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Jay.
And welcome to the show. What are we talking about this week, Jay?
Well, today we've got a fun episode. We are titling it Crazy Rich Christians. And into this episode, we're going to be talking about preachers and sneakers. Yes, that Instagram account that people love or love to hate. We are going to be talking about the prosperity gospel, which is something that we've had some discussion about. It'll be fun to do it on the show. We're going to be talking about greed and the want for more. And we're going to be also, hopefully, if we have time, looking at the question, can Christians be rich? All of that coming up. Let's first kick it off with preachers and sneakers.
Boom. Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about, like, for those, maybe they've never seen the Instagram account, what is preachers in sneakers? Obviously, everybody needs to wear shoes. Most people wear shoes when they're preaching. Some people don't because they're like, we're on holy ground here, so I got to take my shoes off. I don't think we deal with too many of those people, so we'll just exclude those people. So what is the preachers and sneakers thing? What's that all about?
Preachers and sneakers is basically a guy who's like a random Joe, everyday person that was watching a pastor on TV and realized that he was wearing really expensive shoes. So he took a picture of the shoes, and then he took a picture, like a screenshot of the website that had the price on it, and he put them side by side on Instagram without a caption. And a bunch of his friends saw it, and they were like, whoa, this is really crazy. And so then he did it like 2 more times with a couple of other preachers that he saw. Like, he started to see a pattern. And his friends were like, you should make this its own account. And within, I think it was like 2 weeks, he had like thousands and thousands of followers, maybe hundreds of thousands of followers. I'm not sure the exact number, and it totally caught him off guard.
Yeah.
And his main reason for doing it was pretty much like, it seemed incongruous, right? Last episode, we talked about the importance of living a congruous life with Christian beliefs. So this is a guy that was like a Christian guy and was looking at pastors and went, hey, there seems to be a disconnect here. And it wasn't that it like sat wrong with him. It was more like he didn't know what to think. It was just kind of like there's a disconnect and I don't quite know what to think of it. Picture, screenshot, share it to the internet, see what other people think of it. And that's how Preachers and Sneakers was born. So what do you think when you see preachers wearing like really expensive clothes?
Yes, so I will say on that, I just looked up the Preachers and Sneakers Instagram account, and they have 206,000 followers right now. And yeah, they look at a bunch of different preachers. What I think when I see preachers wearing really expensive clothes, I don't understand why. I guess my first thought, which I think some of us might be thinking that like, oh, they're spending all of the church's money on this. Mm-hmm. Most of those pastors have book jobs or they have other things that they do. They're like leadership roles and stuff like that. So I don't think they're spending all of that money from the church.
And some of them are gifted.
And yes, and some of them are gifted. And that's actually an important distinction because on there I saw Kanye West and him and the pastor that he was with in that were wearing some Yeezys. Well, Kanye is the guy that makes those shoes. So he gets those shoes 100% free. So the fact that they were like, oh, super expensive shoes, like...
Right.
They're his shoes. It's not like he has to pay for them. So, although Kanye West obviously is going to be like spending a ton of money on stuff anyways because it's Kanye.
Right.
But some of those, I think they're gifts. Yeah, so sometimes it's like, okay, that's, we're overreacting. But at the same time, like, what is the purpose of having stuff that expensive? I guess that's my question. That's what it comes down to for me is why have super expensive shoes as a pastor? As a person in general, I guess. Why have that?
Right. It would be like a status thing. It's like the iPhone is a status symbol, right? So, not for everyone. Some people just have it because it's their favorite phone, but at least in the beginning, the purpose of buying the iPhone was like, hey, I have an iPhone, what do you have? Like, my phone's cooler than your phone type of a thing. And people do that with cars, people do that with houses, people definitely do it with clothes, people do it with jewelry. So people do it with watches. Guys are really into watches.
Oh yeah.
I love watches. Mine is not that I just punched the table. Mine is not that expensive, unfortunately or unfortunately. I guess it depends on your point of view.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I enjoy watches if they have a start and a stop and they're digital, and I use them for working out. Otherwise, I don't really wear watches. But I think that goes back to it really goes back to kind of vanity and how Christians should be living our lives.
Right.
Because when we're out there, trying to compare with others, and I think this is a very big topic, is like, should pastors have expensive stuff so that they can relate to the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's that argument, but then it's also like, well, how expensive do you really need to relate to the world? Like,
Right.
and so I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that. Like, first off, do we think these preachers should have expensive sneakers? I guess let's settle what we personally think. Do you think these preachers should have expensive sneakers or not?
So, I would say that there's probably no reason that they couldn't have the expensive sneakers, because, like we were talking about last night, actually, where it's not like money in itself isn't the problem, it's the love of money is the problem. So I think it probably depends on the preacher. Like, is having the thing causing them to love having the thing more than the mission? Is it supplanting that deep set value? Is it filling a hole that shouldn't be filled by expensive sneakers? Because, like, they might be able to use it as a tool to reach people, maybe not. Maybe it's just a gift from them and they took it gratefully, and they're like, hey, I'm wearing this thing like to show gratitude to this person that is like sitting in the audience, and I'm showing him that, hey, look, I'm wearing your shoes, I'm grateful for you for giving me the shoes. Could be that, we don't know. I don't know that it would be inherently bad, but it could tip towards being bad. It's like what we were talking about with money. It's like having money isn't necessarily a bad thing, but how much money becomes a bad thing. How much money does it take to become greedy and hoarding, right? How much money do you have to have in your bank account before you become a hoarder, right? And that's a slippery slope at times, right?
Yes. I would say if the shoes are gifted to you, it's not a bad thing to wear them. And we don't know if these shoes are gifted to them or if they bought them. I would say, hands down, if they're buying $400 pairs of shoes without a medical necessity for it, that is wrong. And I will just say that as a pastor, really as a person in general, like, you can buy cheaper shoes and you can do better stuff with that money. And so, not necessarily that they're misusing the church funds, which I think a lot of times is the discussion. Is like, oh, they're getting all this money from the church, and so then they're just misusing it. But I think in general, I guess when I look at Jesus, I don't think he would be spending $400 on a pair of shoes ever, even if he was a millionaire. Like, so I think if you were personally going out there and spending it, and this is just my hot take, so I could be wrong, that if you're spending that much money on shoes, then that's an issue because there's no need to do it. That would be my point of view, I would say, with that.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment, where nice stuff comes into your life and you can turn it down, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm trying to be humble, I'm not trying to attract attention to myself. I've had this thought, and I want to know what your thoughts are on this thought. What if accepting the provision to buy, like, I had this book deal, I did this, I went and did this speaking thing, I made this amount of money, I have the ability to buy these $400 pair of shoes without it hurting my finances at all. What if that's a gift from God and I'm just accepting the gift from God?
I mean, that would be a good question. And I guess maybe, like, I don't think having money is a bad thing.
Right.
And I don't think having nice things is necessarily a bad thing. I would just say, in my eyes, there's no possible way that a $400 pair of shoes is
a justifiable purchase.
Is a justifiable purchase, yes.
Right.
And, yeah, what were you going to say?
I think that I think there's some argument to be made for, oh yeah, you could take that money and put it to like a better cause than $400 pairs of shoes. You could have 2 pairs of shoes for $400. You could have a pair of runners and a pair of like really nice like dress shoes, whatever the argument is. I think probably the best argument that I heard, and this was an argument put forward by the guy that makes the Instagram account, Preachers and Sneakers, is that when you're wearing $400 pair of shoes, or you're wearing a really expensive shirt that costs like $100 for a t-shirt, you're putting out like a status symbol, and it can create feelings of jealousy in people that are watching you, right? Like, oh, he's got such a better life than me, I want that. Oh, he's got nicer things than me, I want that. And I think that might be where more of the danger comes in. Obviously, you can't control other people's reactions to you, but people do this every day, especially with social media now, where it's like, I'm in Hawaii, take a picture, send it out to all their friends, and like, look at where I'm at. It's 105 degrees, and I'm by the beach, and I'm drinking a Mai Tai, whatever. So people do that all the time here. And what he said that I thought was really interesting is that through making this account, he's become very careful of not just like what he buys, but what he posts on social media and what he projects out to other people, because he realized that we don't just make people jealous with clothes and shoes and t-shirts and cars and watches, but we make people jealous with like experiences. Look where I am.
Yeah.
Look who the friends that I'm with. We're all having such a great time. And then the other person has that fear of missing out that everybody's talking so much these days.
And the Apostle Paul would say, I became all things to all people so I might win some. Right? And so that's a piece of it where it's like, if these shoes are going to dissuade someone because they think, oh, I'm just taking money, or whatever they're thinking, it takes them away from the kingdom, then I shouldn't be, having it.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's a great argument there.
Yeah, I think that was probably the most cohesive argument against that I heard. I think it would be a good idea now to move on to prosperity gospel, because there's a flip side to this where there are some pastors that have fancy clothes plus the jet, and then they ask for a ton of money, and they give an incentive like, hey, if you give me this amount of money, God's going to give you, like, if you give me $5, God's going to give you $100. And I think you have more exposure to this than I do. So what's been your first exposure to this?
Yeah, prosperity gospel, so the health, wealth, and happiness gospel, right? So I think this is just totally false. Obviously, the Bible never says that you're just gonna have tons of money coming at you. But one of the times when I was in, I think, high school, and I was scrolling through the TV as I was doing a workout, and it turned to this religious broadcasting network, and so I started watching that. I was like, okay, whatever, this is kind of interesting. And this guy comes on the screen, and he starts talking, and he has a little bit of a lisp, and he's all like, if you send $40 a month, I will personally pray for you. And I have no idea who this pastor is, so my how I sound is totally not the way they are. But they were saying $40 a month, and he will personally pray for you, and everything will go well in your life if you just give $40 a month for him personally to pray for you. Right? And that is so not what the Bible says. And this idea that these preachers are just taking all this money, and you name it, you claim it, is another one of their mottos. And it's oh, I am going to have this car, I'm going to have this. And that takes away from what the Bible is all about, which is about spreading the news of the word, right? It's not about you personally being happy by having a lot of things.
Right.
So yeah, the prosperity gospel to me is just totally fake, but it's one of those things that is being spread around the world currently. And if you look in some of these areas that haven't really had too much influence from the gospel at all, from Bible-believing gospels, prosperity gospel is coming in, and it's intruding before the real gospel is able to. And so then they're having problems actually teaching no, you are going to suffer, no, things are going to be bad, because the other church in town is saying, well, everything's going to be better if you just give all you have. And so I think prosperity gospel is a big issue, I guess I would say.
Yeah, definitely is a big issue. And I think that what it comes down to is it plays on people's want for stability and people's want for happiness, right? So basically it offers stability. You're not going to have these ups and downs in life, and people always want to be happy. So then, hey, if you give this, then you'll be fine. It also plays on people's greed, right? Because if you give me $40, you're going to get a great return on investment. You're going to get $100, or you're going to get me to personally pray for you, right? You're going to get me to intercede for you to God, and then God, obviously listens to me so much, so he's going to give you all this nice stuff. First of all, that's a big ego problem. Second of all, we don't need somebody to intercede to God for us, because we have the last high priest, right? We have Jesus that goes and intercedes on our behalf. So when people come and they're like, hey, I've got the touch, I'll personally pray for you, I'm just okay, I appreciate prayer. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate when people pray for me, right? But paying somebody as a service to pray for me is not.
Yeah, that's
not
totally.
it. If he had that touch, shouldn't he just like start praying for everybody, and then everybody would be like, he would be the most.
Yeah, well, he's got to get the pump primed with your cash. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's very interesting, and I think going back to what Jesus says in the book of Matthew, he says no one can serve two masters. Either you'll love one and hate the other, or you'll hate one and love the other.
Right.
And then he makes this very exactly where we're at, because the next sentence that he says is no one can serve both God and money.
Right.
So he's saying two masters. He's literally talking about God and money. And the prosperity gospel puts money up there as God is your vending machine to get money.
Right.
You put a little change in and you get this
lot of
great
change
reward
out.
out.
Cha-ching. It's like
And-
pulling the lever at the slot machine.
Yeah, it's pulling the lever on the slots. Yeah, and so I think that's the biggest issue, because we all love money at a certain extent. That's part of, I think, our fallen human nature, is that we love shiny things.
Oh yeah, we love shiny things. That's why we all buy iPhones. Well, except for me, I buy Androids. But that new iPhone looks sweet.
Yeah, and the people that buy new iPhones every single year, or they buy new cars every year or
Right.
two, and it's like you just want the coolest new thing, and
Yeah.
and that's not really what the Bible is all about.
This is really tough for me because I want the coolest new thing. I really do.
Yeah.
I struggle with that one for reals. I'm eyeing the latest, the latest Android phone. Keeping tabs on the latest iPhone. I'm keeping tabs on the latest camera. I'm keeping tabs on the latest, Chromebook, MacBook, Windows tablet, Windows PC.
Oh, wow.
I love technology.
You're all about it.
I need to pay that guy $40 to pay for me because I need help.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, I have decided, personally, that I never want to own a new car.
Okay.
And so, this is a little bit different than technology. But I think a new car is a total waste of money.
Okay.
And I think you guys just was yours pre-owned cars, or was yours brand new?
No, ours was new, but we got it for a reason. So we got it because we knew that we were going to be a one-car family. So we wanted something that was super reliable.
Okay.
And
so,
it was our only car. So we're like, we're just going to put all of our money there. and that's
yes.
it.
So you guys have a new car. So, I'm already against you on this bit. But I think
Two
that...
strikes. Once on the technology, once on the car.
One's on the car, yeah. I don't think a new car is ever necessary. I think you can get a certified pre-used or pre-owned car that is up to 5 years old for a lot cheaper price, and it's going to do just as well as a brand new car.
Mhm.
And I think brand new cars are just a waste of money, and all it is people trying to look cool and have cool new stuff. Now, you guys got a brand new car. And I wouldn't say you got it because you were like, oh, look at me, we're better than everybody else. But I feel you could have saved money with a certified pre-owned car.
Sure.
And it would have lasted probably just as long because, given the rate of return, I guess. But anyways, that's just one thing that me personally, I'm like, new cars, don't need them ever, period.
Right. So the main reason that we didn't do that is because, well, we can get into that. Probably off show. But the main
Probably
reason...
off the topic. But anyways.
It was our only car, and if it breaks down, I can't get in the car and go and help her with the broken down used car. So we're like, one car that's reliable, it's pretty new, that's still covered by warranty, the manufacturer can repair it, stuff like that, oil changes, just less headache for us. As a one car family, we went with the less headache route, in our view.
Yes.
Is it correct? Maybe not. You can get some pretty reliable used cars, but
Yes.
it's a gamble. It's a little bit of a gamble.
Yes. Anyways.
Anyway, back to the show.
We'll get back here, guys. Sorry about that. All right. So prosperity gospel, not good. We cleared that. All right. And so what about the question, can a Christian be rich?
Yeah, can a Christian be rich? We actually already covered greed and the want of more kind of really quickly right there. That was the third thing that we were going to talk about.
Oh, greed and the want of more.
Yeah,
Yes.
we just went through that talking
did,
about the
yeah.
iPhone and the new cars.
And the new cars. Yes.
Yeah. We talked about the love of money. That's all good. So yeah, can a Christian be rich?
Now, I guess here would be a better way to phrase that. Can a rich person be a Christian?
Ooh, that's a good way to phrase it too.
Because Jesus would say it is harder for the rich to go into heaven than for a camel to enter through the eye of the needle, right?
Right.
And so that's Jesus' words. That's not me. So can rich people be Christians? Can a Christian be rich? What's your take on that?
I think that it's definitely possible. I think it's difficult because of human nature, because we want more shiny things, right? I want more shiny technology, and other people want like shinier, newer cars, and whatnot. And I think that can be difficult. I think there are people that do it really well, where they're able to have a lot of money, but they're able to, have that open-handed and not be greedy about it. And they're like, yeah, God blessed me with all this money. What does He want me to do with it? But I think even those people, it's their greatest strength, but it's also their greatest weakness, right? So like the devil can use that to tempt them with greed, because they have a lot of money to be tempted with. So I think it's possible, but it's probably not easy.
Yes, I probably lean on the side where I don't think you should have a lot of money in savings. Not that you shouldn't have an emergency fund, not that you shouldn't have some for retirement, but I think we get too focused on having too much for retirement. And honestly, one of my professors, and I just realized that this guy actually died of cancer, which is really sad, but kind of proves his point, is that he did not save anything for retirement. Because I went to a Bible college, so he was a Bible professor, and he was saying the Lord will provide, and he trusted God, so all of his money he wanted to use to help others, and so he did not save a nickel for retirement because he knew the Lord would provide. That's what he believed. That's what he trusted. Now, most of us in at least Western states would say, that's crazy, you need a retirement. Like, God provides you with a brain to save for retirement. But his thing was all about having
God provided
faith.
me with a retirement fund to invest in.
yeah, exactly. But his thing was about, that money could be so much better used now, helping other people out, serving people when they need it.
Right.
Rather than sitting in my bank account. And I think the issue with, I guess the question, can a Christian be rich, or can a rich person be a Christian? What do we define rich as, right? If I define rich as having a couple $1 million in the bank, can a person have that much money saved away and still be a Christian? I mean, it depends how much they're making, I guess. It depends on where their heart is, really. That's the real question.
I think that would probably a better definition would be annual income. If they make a certain amount of annual income that we would define as rich, then... Because it doesn't necessarily go into savings, right? So say maybe they make, $500,000 a year, and then that's like what we would call rich, say. Maybe it's $100,000 is what people call rich, depending on the part of the country and the average level of income. But say they make $500,000 a year, they live off of $60,000 comfortably, and they give the rest of that $500,000 away after they pay their taxes. They would be considered rich, but they're not hoarding it or putting it in savings, right?
Yes.
I don't know that there's anybody that does that. I think there probably are a few.
And that is kind of where I lean. I think you should try to make as much money as possible if you're not in a ministry career. And you should do something like you're saying. Try to live within your means when possible. Not necessarily try to kill yourself. Because then you're being prideful in the opposite way, where you're like, oh, look how good I am. I don't spend any money. And I don't think that's right either. But the question is, are you rich if you have $10 million in the bank and you're just and you aren't working anywhere? You're retired and you're just living off of the dividends from the stock market or whatever. I think if you have a certain number in the bank, you would be considered rich, right? If I had $50 million just sitting in the stock market, I would be rich and I wouldn't have to work.
Right.
Depending on I wouldn't have to work with $50 million in the stock market.
Right.
So I would be rich.
You would die before you spent it all, probably.
Yeah, I would be rich there, but if I'm not giving it away, versus if, like you were saying, you're making $500,000 a year, but you're giving it away. So if you lost your job, you really wouldn't have a rainy day fund.
Right.
I mean, you could make it a little bit, but you wouldn't have $50 million in the bank.
Right.
So I think that's a couple things, but for me, and I think this is a hard line, it's the difference between having money and loving money.
Right, I think it definitely is. You put a couple of Bible verses down here. You already cited one of them. The first one was that for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered far from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. This is 1 Timothy 6:10. It's really interesting because I've heard a lot of people who are not Christians talk about that the more money people make, the more likely they are to be on antidepressants. So you'll have rich people living in New York flying their helicopter to the airport to take the private jet to France for the summer, and they're taking antidepressants and they're miserable.
Well, and the I believe it's Jim Carrey quote is like, I wish everybody had all the money, all the girls, everything they could ever dream of, so they would realize that doesn't make them happy.
Right.
And that's what he says, as a man who, had an amazing movie career and has all the money he could ever dream of. And he says, that's not what make you happy. But we think, no matter how much money you make, you always think, if I had just this much more, I would be more happy.
Another $100,000. I'll be $100,000 happier.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is like, if you're making $30,000 a year, you're like, oh, if I could just get $60,000 a year, I would be happy. We'd be good.
Right.
And then once you get to $60,000, you're like, oh, if I could just make $100,000, then we'd be good. If you're making $100,000, oh, if I could just make $200,000, and it's just
It's a moving window.
Yes, we never get there because we are always wanting more.
Yeah, and that's the second verse that you put down was, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. This is Ecclesiastes 5:10, NIV version. Both of those are NIV version. And that's, your point. That it's a moving target, and we see this over and over and over again. There's a couple of people that I was listening to. They were talking about, one of them, they were talking about Jeff Bezos, who makes, like, in his biggest day, he made, like, I think it was like $14 billion or something like that.
In one day,
in
yeah.
like one day.
Exactly.
Crazy amount of money. But he still is working long hour days, and they're like, well, maybe he enjoys the work, but like he already doesn't have to work a day in his life, and he's still going. So why? The other people that they were talking about was, there was a comedian, and he was talking about Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Kevin Hart. He was like, those are two people that are like at the top of their career. They're set for life, but they still continue to grind incredibly hard day after day after day, which is, like, at this point, whoever loves money never has enough, and they're not satisfied. Maybe the charitable view is that maybe they just really love what they do.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just, the next goalstone, the next milestone.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like who knows why they keep doing it. I would assume that they get some sort of purpose out of doing what they do. Right. And so, but
that's the charitable view. That's the good, hopefully that's the case.
Hopefully there's something that they enjoy out of it.
Hopefully it's something that they find meaningful. But there's a lot of people, who chase the wealth for the wealth's sake. And that's not a good thing either, because then you have, like, pastors that have their third private jet, and they're trying to raise money for a fourth one. And I think that made the news a little bit ago, and it's like, why does this guy need a fourth private jet?
Yeah, well, even not pastors, because I think we attack pastors a lot.
Because they're public figures.
Because they're public figures, but even more than that, at the church that we attend, I was just talking to the pastor, and he said that the only people who have ever asked to see the financial report are people who don't tithe. People who don't give to the church. They're the ones that are concerned about the the report and how the church is doing with their finances. He said
interesting.
He says that tithers are allowed to see the financial report if they ask for it. And he's only had 2 people over the 12 years that he's been pastor ever say, yeah, can we see the financial report, who are actually tithers. The people that actually make the big deal about it are the people who aren't tithing. Because they're trying to make an excuse to justify why they aren't giving money to the church. And so they don't think the church is putting the money in the right resources. And I think this is an issue for Christians, and kind of for our audience, if they believe in Jesus. If you aren't tithing, then you are not following the Bible.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter which church it's going to. I'm not going to say you have to give it to our church or to some other church, but the first 10% belongs to God.
Right. And that could be a tithe to a church, or it could be a tithe to, like, a charitable organization that's, like, building wells in Africa or whatever.
I would say a Christian charitable organization, because it belongs to God. So I wouldn't say just any charitable organization. But yes, the first 10% is at the very least. And if you're thinking, which this is the thing that most of us think, is like, oh, I don't make enough money to give away 10%. Maybe if I make this amount, which is kind of that moving target, like, oh, if I made this amount, then I would be able to give it away. The thing is that, like, 10% is what the Bible says. It doesn't say you have to make this amount to do it. It's not like taxes where it changes. It says 10% is the bare minimum. That's not even really generosity. That's just what is due God.
Right.
Which goes back to faith and goes back to a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyways.
Well, this is the conundrum here, right?
Yes.
Because you have pastors that, like, taint tithing by, I think there was a song that said he's asking for a 20 with 10,000 on his arm because he's wearing a Rolex, right?
Yeah.
And then you have other churches that are like, hey, we're trying to, reach these people, help support that by, tithing to the church. Or donating specifically to this mission trip or whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. And people don't want to do it because they see the prosperity gospel preachers and the TV evangelists.
I mean, I think that's the charitable view, is they don't want to do it because they see these other people who are doing it wrong. Okay. If we're being honest, I think people are doing it because they're greedy.
Okay.
I think in Western society in general, everybody's rich.
Yeah.
And so for us, we love our money, and so we don't want to give 10% away. And the thing is that, like, so I think the charitable view is that they don't want to give their money away because they don't want it misused. I think maybe the more pessimistic view is that they don't want to give their money away because they don't want to give their money away.
Yeah.
And people just don't want to give away 10%.
Right.
Because that's a lot. That's a big chunk, right? If you're making $50,000 a year, that's $5,000. That's a lot of money to think about. And so, but again, that goes back to the difference between having money and loving money.
Right.
So, little did you guys know, this was just all about getting you to tithe. So, you should be tithing.
That was a long spiel.
A long intro for that, no.
Next episode, we're going to be talking about how to tithe.
Yeah, no.
We're going to send you forms.
Forms, yeah.
No, not really. So, Ryan, you just basically went through this whole spiel on tithing and on greed, and we quoted the Bible a couple of times in here. Well, I think probably more than a couple of times, and then we actually read a couple of passages. Yeah, we read a couple passages. You leaned really heavy on the Bible to talk about tithing. And so the question is like, why should we trust the Bible? Why should we listen to these passages? And why should we do what the Bible says in tithe? Well, fortunately for us, that's the concept. That's the topic for the next episode. So that kind of wraps up today, folks. Come back next time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. That's it for today. Thanks.